Hello. Why are we not getting any? Hello. There we go. Okay, good. We have sound. Great. Okay. Let's see how everyone did here. Okay, Cheska.
My question this week is about the physics material, and I tried putting it on the triangle over here to make it bouncy when the player bumps into it, but it doesn't do anything. So is that because the physics material is more for dynamic objects? Thank you.
Yeah, in general, you're right there. The physics material is going to work more obviously on dynamic objects. However, yeah, over the weekend I brainstormed a few things. I may give you guys. We're going to switch gears today and talk about particles, and then I may give you guys a updated character controller for Wednesday, that would react better to the things that are moving around. The short answer is, you understand the physics material. That's the correct idea. The situation of the character is a little bit more complicated because it's being controlled by script, and there's slightly different kinds of colliders on the character thing, which don't react quite the same way as the ones that are just sort of free-moving objects. I think there's a solution to this. I almost have one developed, and hopefully I can give you guys a new character controller on Wednesday that addresses that. But that looks good. That looks like Fall Guys there that you got going on. That's good. Here is Rocio.
Hello, my question for this week is about the box colliders. So I noticed that in my spinner, when it rotates the first time, the box collider changes size. It doesn't stick to the spinner during the whole rotation, which makes the character pass straight through it. I'm not really sure how to fix this.
The box collider on the spinner, it looks like it was staying put there. Let's see. I can't quite see it.
Hello, my question for this week is about the box colliders. So I noticed that in my spinner, when it rotates the first time, the box collider changes size. It doesn't stick to the spinner during the whole rotation, which makes the character pass straight through it. I'm not really sure how to...
Okay, I see what it's doing there. That's a weird one. Let's see. Mine is not doing that, is it? Come over here to spinner. Okay, mine doesn't seem to be doing that. If I see what yours is doing there, let's see what's going on with your, maybe something with the hierarchy of your objects. Let's look for a second.
Hello, my question.
So you've got the spinner. The spinner does have a child object. Box, much longer on the X.
For this week is about the box colliders. So I noticed that in my spinner, when it rotates the first time, the box collider changes size. It doesn't stick to the spinner during the whole rotation, which makes the character pass straight through it. I'm not really sure how to fix this.
Yeah, you can see that yours is changing right there. Right here, your size of your colliders is changing. Let's just confirm that that is not happening on this one. Yeah, those are good. The thing that seems most obvious to me here is perhaps you somehow keyframed that, the collider size.
Hello,
Because these are changing here, and it's possible you added keyframes to those. So I can't quite see because we don't see the animation window, I don't think. No. So these values here, make sure that you haven't keyframed those for the collider, because that would obviously do that. If you did do that, then just delete those keyframes on the box collider. For the spinner, the other thing is that I kept the mesh. Here's what my spinner looks like. I've got the box collider and the mesh all up on the top level here. So those are, you didn't have any mesh. It looked like your mesh was a child of the other ones, and I might make that change so that the spinner, mesh filter, and mesh renderer are up at the top with the rigid body and the colliders. That would be one of my first suggestions there. So check the keyframes and then try rebuilding it with the mesh up top. Cool. Lola?
Hello, hope everyone is doing well. I just had a question about Cinema 4D, specifically with the spline tool. I was wondering if there was a way to make it into a real shape. I do remember there being a way, or if it's maybe a different tool, to utilize the spline tool to actually make it into a full 3D shape instead of just kind of the guidelines. Is there a different type of tool, or is it something that I have to add to the actual spline on this side? That's my question for this week. Thank you.
There's several answers here, but your thinking is correct. When you make a spline, it's not going to export as anything. It doesn't have any polygons on it. It's just a two-dimensional line in 3D space. A few things about splines real quick. Do not draw splines in perspective. So when you draw them here, right, even if I use the spline tool here and sort of click and draw, which is kind of like Illustrator, if you click and hold, it gives you a Bezier handle. If you click, it just makes a hard corner. But the problem with this is that it's really hard to line up into any kind of shape, right? Because it's kind of drawing it flat to your view. And you see this is at that weird angle now in space. And so when you draw splines, you want to do that in one of these views. This view, or this view. Remember, those views are called the orthographic views, right? They're essentially two-dimensional slices from each side. And so when you draw them here, at least now they are lined up, right? So this is the top view, and this would be like drawing down onto the floor, right? If you needed to draw something that, would go on a wall, you would probably pick this one or this one, right? Because if I drew it over here with this tool, now we see it lines up straight on the wall over there, okay? Now, so we've established that. Draw here, here, or here, not there. The other way to draw, which is helpful, is that if you click and hold on this spline tool, sketch is not like the Illustrator pen tool, it's more like a freehand drawing, right? So here I can just draw these splines, and there's a smoothing parameter which you can turn up and down. If I turn it up, it'll make a very smooth line, right? Or you can turn it down and get something that's more jittery like that. And that makes a spline. But how would I turn this into a shape? Let's divide it into two things. One, how to turn splines into a shape. You can add a spline to a volume builder. This is super useful. Check this out, right? So these splines here, I'll do the volume builder, volume mesher, builder inside the mesher, and dump the spline into the builder, and boom. It kind of automatically turns these into, like fat shapes. How do we change the shape? In the volume builder, you select the spline, and then there's a radius parameter, so you could make them fatter. So this is particularly useful for this like Fall Guys art style, because you could make these very like puffy looking things, and you could have them mushed together in a way that would not be easy otherwise, right? If you wanted to make like a pillows or something. And then again, anytime we use the volume builder, volume mesher workflow, at the end of the day, you want to put the remesh at the top to get something that looks nice and clean afterwards, like that, right? There's the remesh is done. See how much nicer the topology looks on that? Now, all of the topology lines kind of follow the pattern of the splines. Remesh, very nice. And then one further thing is that in the builder, you have, I'm going to turn the remesh off because that does take a while. You have this function graph, and this is the thickness across the length, right? Something to have in your notes here. This is a term you need to memorize as someone who worked with computers. Normalize. It's a normalized graph. Because how long is the spline you drew? It could be really long, it could be really short, right? And so this is going to be the thickness along the length, but we don't really know how long the length is. And so when we have a parameter like that we're fitting into a range, we normalize it. And so 0 is the beginning of your spine, and 1 is the end, wherever that is, however long it is. And so now you can control-click in this window to adjust the length of the spline. And so if I do this, right, notice that even though this spline was like multiple parts, it made one object, okay? And so it's kind of seeing all of them as one length. And so if I do this, you see that, I guess this one is the beginning of it. And then they sort of get fatter up until whatever the last one was I drew. However, there's this cool thing right here, scale per segment, where you can tell it to take this graph and evaluate it per segment. If I do this, now over the length of each spline that I drew, it's going from skinny to fat. And you could further shape this however you would want. So you could make it go skinny, fat, skinny, right? or skinny, fat, skinny, fat, right? Like that. This one goes down to 0, make it more look like that. And the spline stays active, which is a super cool deal. If I select the spline again, go back to the sketch tool, go back to the top view, I could draw some more splines. And they automatically get entered into the system. So, one way, this would be useful for certainly like organic looking shapes like that. If we delete that one and just sort of draw something over here, you could see how you would start to use this perhaps for some kind of like tree. Right, I'm able to draw all the branches that I would want here, and they all get mushed together in the volume builder. And again, they could be tapered using the builder, spline, right? And if you needed it to be fatter or skinnier, right? So that's one way splines can be used in the volume building workflow, along with other stuff, right? So if I wanted some sort of cube on the end of one of these things, like that. Right now it's part of the same mesh there. And again, the whole thing, again, could be smoothed, right? So if we add that at the top, so it affects the ones below it. By default, a bunch of stuff disappears because it's smoothing it so much it just kind of goes away. And so you can dial the amount of smoothing. And again, right, we can see now that you're looking at meshes more often, that's not an ideal mesh topology. Turning this back on. Aha, much better, right? Why does it feel better? Because the topology follows the shape. This is good. You want that. In most instances, the way that you're manipulating the object has to do with the shape of the object, and so that becomes important. Now, the other way to make it into a shape, perhaps, would be the objects that are right here. You can extrude or sweep. Let's look at extrude first. So if I drew something on the ground here, so I'm drawing it from the top down, right? As if I had a huge marker. And notice that splines are color-coded in Cinema 4D, so that tells you the beginning and the end. The beginning is white, the end is blue. That's how they do it by default. And then I could take an extrude object and dump the spline into the extrude. You see that it does extrude it, but it's not exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to be like a solid shape. This is just kind of like a ribbon that follows the spline, because the spline is not closed. And so if you need to close the spline, select the spline and then click here, close spline. Boom. Now I get this. And so this would be a way that you could make big sort of irregular walls or shapes. The biggest thing to remember here in extrude is the offset. So that could make it much bigger. Can you go negative? Yeah, you could do that. Right, so you could make some sort of big shape like so. If I select it and continue to draw, it should update. Okay, in this case, it does not. So you could, there's a couple things. You want to extrude this spline as well. The easiest thing would be to duplicate your extrude object. So just going to Control D or Control C, Control V, and then swap out that one for my new one. And again, it's not doing it because it's not closed. So I can make multiple shapes like this. So extruding. If you wanted to extrude something straight back, you could draw it in this angle, maybe with the pen tool. Now that's interesting that that one did go into that. Alright, and so now I can offset this object. Another word about this is I'd want to go to object mode, select, okay. How's the anchor point on this object? Good, right? It's at the bottom of something that probably looks like it's going to sit on the floor. Good. How's the anchor point on this object? Not good. It's also over here, and the object's over there. That's not great. So we need to adjust that. One of the easiest ways is one of the shortcuts you want to have written down, Shift-C. Search for commands in C4D. Super useful, right? And the command you should write down as a way to center your axis point is called axis center. And so if I go Shift-C and type in axis center, there it is. And now I can just click on it in my window. I really like Shift-C. It opens up the axis center window, and you could say execute on this. If we look, in this case, when we first pressed the button, it did not move the axis point. It stayed over there, which is not what we wanted. There it is. Why did it do that? A little complicated. It stayed over there because geez. Okay. Usually when you use axis center, I leave this as is, but I usually check these two boxes, include children and use all objects. And so that the top level looks at all the stuff below it to move the anchor point. Because once again, remember that when we use the anchor point, we have to set the 3D anchor point in Unity. In C4D, because you cannot set it in Unity, right? So you have to set it in C4D. Is the one main difference between sprites and meshes is that you can't go in and edit the mesh anchor point in Unity. And so Shift-C, and then search for axis center. Cool. So let's go with those two for now. There's some more to say about this as we make some more objects, but that's a good start. As far as two pretty useful ways to turn splines into geometry. Nolan.
So my question for this week is about materials and Cinema 4D when you have like multiple in there. I know it'll do this one the most, but is there any way to like combine them or use them so we can use multiple materials if we're going to learn about that? So yeah.
So there's a few things there. Just the one, mostly setting up the materials here. I'm going to press NB so I can see the polygons. Yeah, we'd want to set up the materials here, not necessarily what color they are, because as we discussed, we can change that once we get to Unity. But you talked about using multiple materials on one object, and that is a process of select object, and then hit C, which will turn it into a polygon object. And then you can assign different materials to different polys. So for instance here, I'm going to make two materials. One of them is like red. There we go. And the other one will make blue. Right? And so if I want part of this cylinder to be red and part of it to be blue, I would select it and hit C. Okay. Now, if I go into polygon mode and select polygons, right? These here, for instance, I can make part of it red, and then I can make another part of it blue. The implied question here is like, okay, well that's great, but what if I wanted to color it beyond without being limited to the polygons? The answer to that is that eventually, in a few weeks here, we're going to talk about UV unwrapping, and then that will become possible. But for right now, we're limited to this. And so now I have that and that, and if I had another material here, right, if I put it at the end, like you said, that covers it up. But if I move it back here, that the other ones are now on top of that one, like so. So now, let's see how, that's fine, but let's see how this should work in practice most of the time, right? Because what is this shape that I made here in my just very quick example is not that great. Why is it not that great? It's not that great because it does not have a rounded corner. We want to have rounded corners. It's essential for making it not look like a low poly kind of game from 1994. So we want to have rounded corners, and the way that we do that is we add the bevel. And so in this instance, if I were to do this whole process again, I would make the cylinder, and then I would make the bevel and dump that in there like so. Now I have that bevel on the corner, which I could make a little bit larger and give it a couple subdivisions. Right now I have nice rounded corners. And so instead of hitting, well, if I do hit C, yeah. If I hit C on this object here, it turns it into a polygon object still with the bevel deformer on it. I guess that's still going to, the problem here is that these bevels are being created by the bevel deformer. And at this point, you may want to assign materials to them. And so the ways to convert something into a polygon object, usually a better road here is to use a command called connect objects. Okay, connect objects will essentially bake it down so that it gets rid of the deformers, and now we have just the mesh, which, as we know, is the thing that actually transfers over. So if I select this, right click, and say connect objects, Then I get a new one here, which is just that mesh. The other stuff is still there, but I can delete it. Now I have access to all of the polygons that are part of this mesh. So I could make that part red. I could make, I can make this part, there we go, blue. And then I could make the rest of it white and then send that over, right? So connect objects is the one you would use more in practice there, because it breaks it down into just the polygon object with the rounding baked into the mesh. Good question. You guys are nailing it on questions this week. Stephanie.
Hello.
Looking fun?
So I was
Cool. Stephanie kind of did what you were talking about there, yeah? Yep. Somebody's played Fall Guys.
wondering how we would go about making it so when you were to like run into the fence or anything, how we would make it so the capsule would bounce off of it in a sense. So thank you.
Yeah. Stay tuned. I should be able to give you a different controller on Wednesday that sort of has this baked into it. Like I said, it's the level of complication we hear with this. You know, it does. This is the one that's provided by Unity that works fairly well. But in this particular, and we've used it before in games that weren't quite as like physics driven. But in this one, we're definitely going to want that bounce capability. So I think I'll be able to hand off something on Wednesday that'll be a little bit more like what we wanted. But this is looking great. This looks like Fall Guys level, and you got your robot back there guarding the end. That's looking good. Kai.
So this week we learned how to create simple textures and apply them in a simple way. And so I was curious if we would learn how to do more complex textures and apply them so that they fit our models.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to do several iterations of that. We're going to make some procedural textures. Maybe we'll do some of that today. There's some different ways we can go about it. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, we want to get in there and do some UV unwrapping, which maybe we'll talk about on Wednesday. Today we're going to talk about particles, but we'll get there with that. And maybe we'll make a procedural material, which would be useful. We'll look. But yeah, we're definitely going to do more. It's only February still. Cool. Amaya.
So this recording is going to be a bit short as usual, but as for progress this week, I lost track of time, so that's why I'm only bringing this in. My bad. But I've been having trouble, like, importing things and like making, I guess, like the objects and stuff for these animations. I'm watching the lessons and stuff, but I am still not grasping really how to. And as for the call, it was sent to me as a spam call, so I was not able to identify an answer. So I missed that, but I was able to reschedule, so I'll tell you more about that soon. And
Okay, that's good. So the importing, I mean, in Unity, we're just dragging things into this window, right? If it's a PNG, it goes in here. If it's not FBX, it goes in here, right? This is the importing part of it there. Like, we're just dragging these in. There are some issues that we discussed previously about importing meshes and the scale of them and whatnot. But that's where we're headed with that. Janelle.
Hello. So my question for this week is I made this sign in Cinema 4D and then imported it into Unity, and the N is not loading in. I've tried to import it a few different times, and it's just not loading in, and I'm not sure why. So yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so clearly, right, you know, I didn't teach you guys everything there is to learn about 3D modeling and like 2 classes, right? It's complex. So what is going on there is a topic that we haven't, I've structured stuff in this class, right? There's another class where we sort of get more into nitty gritty. We're still going to do a lot of stuff in this class, but where we sort of just focus on the 3D modeling. That's ART 185. But there's an issue here with the polygons of an object. So we hadn't really talked about this. If I grab this one and I hit C, so that now it's no longer a primitive, it's just a polygon, right? And then this allows me to now go in and select polygons. And you may have noticed that when you select a polygon in Cinema 4D, it becomes orange, right? That's because each polygon only has one side, okay? So if we look at the other side of it, right? When you're looking at it like this and when you're sort of constructing things with them, it's easy to conceptualize this as like paper, right? Like we're creating this outer shell out of something like paper. But for the computer, it's slightly different. It's like paper on one side, but then the other side would be invisible, okay? And so only one side gets rendered by default. And so here, what did I just do? I moved the camera into the cube, or in the shape right now. And if I select a polygon, look, it's no longer orange, it's blue, okay? And so this, what you need to write down in your notes is that this direction that the polygon is facing is called the normal of the polygon. Okay, now, so it only faces one direction. And different programs handle this differently by with some different default settings. Allow me to demonstrate. So I'm going to grab all of these here, Control A, or actually I'm just going to get this one here. And I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to come down here to the bottom, and you see there's a command called reverse normal. What this is going to do is essentially flip that polygon so it's facing into the cube rather than out. And so if I right click and I say reverse normals, boom, it's blue, right, instead of orange. Ideally, what you want to see on all of your models is they should be orange, right? We have to make the outer shell of the shape, and the outer shell should be orange, right? So now I'm going to hit Control A, and this would be a problem, right? In that if we wanted this to be a cube when we bring it into Unity, it looks fine in Cinema 4D because the defaults in Cinema 4D are slightly different than they are in Unity. But allow me to show you what happens. If I export this one as an FBX and bring it into Unity from the desktop here, this will be inverted normals. And we'll bring it into Unity. All this that I'm saying right now will make more sense in a minute. Cool. So here's what I get in Unity. Check this out, right? So it looks like a cube if we just look at the side of it. But now if I look at the top where the normal was inverted, it's invisible, right? If I were to move the camera inside down here and somehow look up, I'm not sure I'm going to even be able to make that work. No, it doesn't really work, right? And so this is something you need to keep track of. Right, that as you become a more powerful 3D modeler, this may become an issue. We want all of the polygons on our object facing out so that we don't run into this problem of an inverted normal. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to handle here in Cinema 4D. How do you handle this, right? So a lot of times this happens if someone pulls a polygon, right? If you go to I and bring it in and hit D or something, and you sort of extrude this out. Now I go to Control A. You see like, oh, like a bunch of this is inverted. That's no good. There's a command to sort of easily take care of this. I'll go Control A. That one's still messed up here. I'm going to right click, and the thing, if you have messed up normals, the command to run here is called align normals. So watch what happens now. Right click, align normals. Boom. Everything is back to orange. So align normals is pretty handy. It kind of looks at the surface, and it's looking for ones that are flipped, right? And it says like, okay, well this bunch here is blue in a sea of orange, and so those should probably be facing the other way. And it flips them for you. And so that align normals fixes the problem. Cool. And Janelle made a sign. How'd she make a sign? I just did that with some splines, right? Where you're like, okay, well, what if I drew some type object mode? There we go. Right, if you could, here's a T, right? And then how would I turn this into a shape? I could extrude the shape, right? And now I have something like 3D text. Or these right here are all 2D spline primitives, right? And so there's some options here. One is that if you click and hold, there is a text object which sort of automatically takes some splines and extrudes them into three-dimensional type, right? And so now you can come in here and put whatever you want, and you can load fonts, right? This works like any other program in this instance, right? And that's good, right? I can make this fatter, right? You could have this at the start line. You could spell start correctly, not strat, start. Oh my gosh, not a good typing day. There we go. Nailed it. Okay, so like you could have that at the starting line, right? But you want to have rounded corners. So let's throw that bevel on there. And hit NB so I can see the, and you see as soon as I throw the bevel on there, I'm getting rounded corners, but this kind of looks like garbage. What's going on there? The bevel, right, is going to perform differently, and when we run into type here, we may run into some problems, right? You see like over here, we get an issue. And let's subdivide a little bit here. So I give it 2 subdivisions. It cleans some of this up, and then we're still getting some of this stuff right there. This is called a shading error. How could I fix this? One of the ways is in the bevel, clicking Fong break rounding. And so that one right there, watch the shading error on the front of the T. There it is. That's not great. That's better. Not great, better, right? And so that works. Now, this is a pretty good setting for my bevel. Let's say 5 centimeter offset and 2 subdivisions. I'm going to keep using this. And so set it as a preset up here. So I'm going to say save preset, and this is called Unity Bevel, right? And now say OK. Now when I want to bevel anything else, I don't need to keep doing this over and over again. I can just do this, make another bevel, throw it on there like so, and immediately come down here and select the Unity bevel. And it loads that preset for that object. This goes for every object in Cinema 4D. You can make your own presets for that object, right? There. So I think that's what's going on with yours, Janelle, without getting a better look at the mesh. But that would be my first thing to tell you, investigate. Bring the mesh in here. Make sure that you connect objects on it. Usually connect objects and delete, sort of cleans it up so you don't have the original there. If you just go to connect objects, delete. Now, how do I look at the normals? First, it has to be a polygon mesh. Second, you go to polygon mode. Then you hit Control A, and you look and see. Right now, yeah, there's some weirdness here with this one. Because we had some overlapping stuff, I bet that might be a problem later on in this, right, where that one object. Let's test it. I bet if we bring this in, we may have a trouble with this front face of the R. Let's see if it works or not. I'm going to go ahead and export X object as FBX. Say OK. Bring this in over here. This will be text test. There we go. Save. Come back over here. Desktop. Again, let's bring this in. Test text. There we go. We want to have this at the start line. Nope, we're okay. Okay, that's good. Because when you go to extrude fonts, some fonts are better for turning into three-dimensional type than others. But now, yeah. And so this is super cool. You can put this at the start line here, something like this, and it's up here in 3D space. Maybe it's spinning or moving up and down, and you could throw a fun material on it, something like that, right? Cool? Make sense? Excellent questions. You guys are running into a bunch of the 3D modeling issues here, which is great. We're all learning a lot. And like I said, I try to show you the things that are going to get you the most bang for your buck at the beginning, right? So that instead of 3 weeks of talking about polygon geometry on a cube, and no one has made anything but a cube, I try to show you the techniques that are going to allow you to make more stuff to start, and then we'll sort of fill in some of the gaps as we go, so that we can have a much more fun and interesting experience making actual stuff that works, right? Versus drilling down on the minutia of topology on cubes. I mean, we need to confront some of those issues because it becomes necessary at some point, but what I would write down in my notes is this is called the Pareto principle. Some of you may have run into this in other contexts. This is 20% of the techniques might be able to get you 80% of the results, right? I don't think this is true. Again, this is just a concept Mr. Pareto made up. Okay, but it is applicable to a lot of activities, and I try to use that here, where we're doing something more interesting at the beginning, trying to skew that initial 20% towards stuff that techniques that allow you to get a lot done. So, with that in mind, normals. Good. We all just learned about polygon normals. That's super important. That was Janelle. Here is Angelina.
So during the Cinema 4D project, I noticed that when I was trying to rotate the cube to the alignment that was in the video, the alignment was grayed out. So I wasn't able to click Z plus and then bit to parent. But then I tried a little experiment, and then on this one, it would let me do it. So I wasn't exactly sure what the difference was.
Because this one is not a parent. Check this out up here, right? You did not make the taper a child of the cube. They're both at the same level. So there is no parent of the taper, right? In the one where you got it correct here, it works because you made the taper a child of the cube. That's how deformers work. They need to be a child of the object in order to actually function on the object. And so now that fit to parent button works, and the deformer actually tapers, right? Whereas the other ones did not.
Do it. So I wasn't exactly sure what the difference was between this, everything here is the same, and this one.
Yep,
Not sure.
yep, right? So the hierarchy matters in Cinema 4D quite a bit, whether something is at the same level or something is a child object or if something is a parent. And so that's something you have to pay attention to when you're using Cinema 4D. What's going on up here? Is the hierarchy built correctly?
Sure. I maybe didn't make it a child
Yep, there you go.
properly is maybe what I was thinking. I did, because here I when I put it in.
Yep, you're thinking exactly correctly. Yeah, it's still not a child here for some reason. You got to drag it onto the cube, and then the arrow will point down, right? So, like if I want to taper this thing, I'll go ahead and grab taper here, and I have to click and drag onto the text, and then right there, I can't zoom in on this because the arrow goes away. Right there, when the arrow points down, it makes it a child of the thing. And so now, I should be able to hit that fit to parent. Here, we're seeing the other taper there. And so now I can taper this type, right? So I could do something, like this with it. Some curvature there. You'd want to tread lightly doing this on typography as to not distort it, which would be kind of a bad design move. But yeah, now I'm able to taper the text because if I drag it out, boom, goes back. Click and hold, drag over, and when the arrow is pointing down, let go. Now it's a child of that object. You're figuring it out right before our
I was
eyes.
thinking I did, because here I when I put it in, I made sure that the arrow was down and not this way. I can't remember if that is what I did here. So
It's not what you did there, right? You just got to drag that onto the cube.
I was just wondering if that would cause this to not be graded.
Yep, exactly. All right, you're on the right track. You just gotta review how to make something a child there. It's not. You're just a few clicks away. You're on the right track, and your investigative process was also good. Well done. And then there was one more question. Over here, downloads. Isaac.
Hey, Professor. Sorry, my throat sounds a little weird. I'm dying from voice acting. But yeah,
You still sound like a guy on the radio. It's great.
finally got my picture taken over there, and
Oh, wow.
my God. Ain't he handsome? Look at that smile.
Yeah, handsome man.
Okay, so I don't really have any questions. I guess it's just a matter of me catching up on everything because I'd rather not fail the class. So I might be back on Wednesday,
Sounds like a good plan.
but honestly, I might just stay in my office and actually work on my assignments because I finally got my other classes fixed. It's just this one. So yeah. For an update though, the voice acting is going great. That picture I did just show you is in fact something that will be public soon for the E7 community to see. And I will actually be commentating on a lot of stuff and maybe even go on their live streams and talk about other things. They like my voice a lot for some reason, and now I'm here. I don't have pictures of the office yet because I can't really show it, but yeah. Anyways, you guys have a good day.
Cool. Yeah, so Isaac is streaming and working for a company that makes Epic 7, which is like a mobile game. If anybody plays it, play the anime. Epic 7. On all the platforms. Android, Apple. And what's the company's name? Yeah. I haven't played a whole lot of these kind of mobile game things like this where, yeah, I don't know. I gotta download the game and check it out. But it looks like primarily turn-based. I don't know. I'll report back once I actually play it. And I'm sure Isaac can fill us in. And David, your question was about the sort of swinging pendulum thing, right? So let's see if we can find sort of mimic, or at least, right? We, you know, Stephanie did a good job with that one. She essentially put a sphere, like a wrecking ball kind of design, right? Like a sphere on the end of a thing. Let's see how they look in the game, right? I'm not, the purpose here isn't to copy the game, right? But we're sort of using this art style because it's very achievable with beginning 3D modeling tools. And their visual language, you know, like as if, you know, I think of this as like bouncy house world, right? Everything kind of looks like, you know, like it was inflated. Let's see if we can find one of the things here too. Oh yeah, because your other thing was that you wanted to make a ring that you had to jump through, right? Yeah. And oh yeah, there's like the net. You know, there's like a Fall Guys volleyball thing. There's ones where that thing goes away. There's the super bouncies. There's the nets there. Where's one of the pendulums? There's the fans. Of course, we don't see any in this video. More ads. So there's those huge propellers that kind of operate like that. There's those things that push people on and off. Okay, so there. Yeah, so there's like a wrecking ball kind of thing on a pendulum. The other ones I was thinking of those big hammers, and they've got, oh yeah, those like punching bag kind of things that move back and forth, right? So yeah, let's, like one of those things, how would you make that? And one of those wrecking balls, right? So the basic shape of the wrecking ball idea isn't crazy difficult, right? I mean, the first level of design here, you know, it's sort of a sphere. Now, again, why doesn't the sphere look particularly spherical? Because not enough polygons, right? It needs to look a little smoother. You don't need to crank this number way up here, right? Like you want just enough to make it look round enough, right? And so you need to think a little bit about how big is it going to be in the game. And so like, is it going to be gigantic? Like, are we going to get really close to this gigantic one? Then it may need a few more, right? But is it going to be small? If it's going to be small, then maybe we can get away with, you know, that there. Now, that does it from this vantage point. The if we wanted to, you know, make it look more like the wrecking ball, perhaps with the other parts, we could get into some volume building here. right? So maybe there's a torus. I'm going to switch this a little bit, kind of like so. So the ring radius kind of gives me that, right? I could take another chorus and sort of move it up and rotate it around like this, right? When I rotate it that way, I kind of want it to be exact. So I'm going to start dragging and hold down Shift so that I can lock it to exactly 90 degrees offset, right? So it's not quite off there. That's pretty good. And then it would need to be coming from like some sort of, thing. And so perhaps there's a cylinder here. And part of what makes the game interesting is the sense of scale. It's like these tiny little, blobby guys in this big, big bouncy house-looking world. And so, giving it more of a sense of scale helps with that. There we go. Just to rotate back and forth on something. Control drag this one up to the top, like so. There we go. And then maybe there's another cylinder up here. And one of the other cool things about this design is sort of like, you don't need to build a support structure for everything. Things do just kind of like float, in space. So this might be enough in that instance, right? And so now, that's pretty good. Let's set up some materials here. I kind of want the ball, if you looked at the example, like the ball was kind of cut in half. Like top half is one color, bottom half was another color. So we called this pink. And this one would be blue. There we go, pink. Right, and so now the sphere, I want to make the bottom half pink. So I'm going to hit C, right? And now I can select polygons. How do I select the bottom half? A couple different ways to do this. One really useful selection is U and then L is going to be loop selection. If I go into polygon mode, into here, press U and then L, now you see that as I move around, it's selecting the whole way around the object. So I can hold down Shift, 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 Shift. Makes it really easy to grab all of that. And so I can make that pink and then maybe put blue on the rest of it, like that, right? And so now I want this ring here to be blue, right? This object should really be a child of that object, right? And then this here, we'll make that color, and then this that color. There we go. Right, and then up here at the top, something like that and that. Right. Cool. That's pretty good. I've got some sort of wrecking ball kind of pendulum thing here. Now, we do need to think a little bit about the animation of this, right? And so we want it to rotate from here, right, so that it swings back and forth. And so this object needs to be the top of the hierarchy. So this, go back to here, go back to object mode, there we go. And so this one will be the hinge, and I'll take the other stuff and make it a child of the hinge. And now, with the hinge, if I rotate the hinge, there we go, everything else comes along, right? This will be the support thing, there we go. All of this stuff here could be combined into one object. So I'm going to right click and say connect objects and delete. Boom. Now it becomes just one thing. Still a child of the hinge. I'll keep the hinge a separate one so that I can access that separately. And there's the support at the very top. Okay, so cool. I've got something that works there. Now, if I grab all of these and I'm going to group them together, Alt-G. So the process here, one, rough out the shape, right? I'm just getting like the right players on the field. I know I need a ball, I need a thing, you know, like, and then I start moving around getting the right stuff. Two, topology. Do I need more subdivisions on something to make it look smoother? Three, I need to build the hierarchy, right? Especially for these moving obstacles, right? That's going to be key so that you can animate them correctly in Unity. We need to fix the anchor points. In this case, we're good because that we made the torus at the top the main anchor point there, and so that the other thing is below that, and so that hierarchy will be preserved when it comes over to Unity, and it swings back and forth like so. And up here, this will be wrecking ball. There we go. And so now when we bring this in, we'll grab wrecking ball at the top. We'll go File, Export Object as FBX. Everything else looks good. Remember, no cameras, no lights. Doesn't seem like anybody ran into that problem, so that's good. Boom, boom, boom. Oh my gosh. Problem with school computers here. We'll save it here, hopefully. Or just here. Can I do that? Okay, that's fine. So now, here, let's bring this in. Let's goes out. There we go. Meshes. Let's bring in our wrecking ball. Cool. Looking good. Not very shiny like the other ones. So again, selecting the wrecking ball, coming up here to materials and say extract materials. That gives us the materials to access, right? And so now we can properly tune them here if we want them to look more metallic, whatever we want. Gives us a little bit more look to it. And then to animate this, I do not want to animate here, right? Because anytime you're going to have something that's going to be a prefab, we did this with the first bouncing ball. We want the animation one level down so that it makes it easy to duplicate. So we'll go to the hinge and we'll say animation. Did I make an animation folder? In another folder? Oh, excuse me. And so I'll go one level down, and then I'll select this animation, create. This will be wrecking swing. There we go. Right, and so now, because the hierarchy is maintained here, we should be able to rotate. David, which rotation parameter am I going to want to animate to swing this back and forth? Z, Y, or X?
The Z wants to slow and it goes back and forth, but if we want to go left and right, we use the X1.
Yeah, we want it to go, you know, we want it to spin around this pole, right? And so think about the axis as the pin around which it spins, so it's going to be X, right? Because we can always change its orientation later using this one. So let's check that if I go to rotation here. Good. So I'm going to make it, I don't know, 60. There we go. And let's go ahead and turn on recording. And I'll say add key. And then we'll have it swing to the other side. So that'll be, is negative 60 going to do it? Yeah, negative 60 will do it. Add key. And then I want it to swing back, so I'll just Control C, Control V, right? And so now we hit play, right? It's fast, but we can always slow that down later, right? That's not a big deal. We do, in order to get the swing more, right, we want to hang at the end. And so let's go into the curves. Let's grab rotation, X, and press F so we can see the curves there. And grab all the keyframes and set them to both tangents weighted. This is going to allow us to do what you would do in Cinema 4D and drag out these handles so that it really hangs at the end of the swing. And you do want it to swing symmetrically, so you want to make sure that this one is in between the other two there. If we could slow it down here too. If you hold down Alt, right click, you can sort of zoom out a little bit and go back to dope sheet, grab these, and if you grab the end, you can sort of just expand it. That's too much. Too much. Right, so that gives us that real hang at the ends. Versus it looking more like murr, 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 right? We get that sense of weight of it swinging because of those curves. You could exaggerate it even more. If you came in here and pressed F so you could see it. Again, grabbing these and adjusting said handles. Right now that it's a little bit slower, you could probably drag this some more. Ideally, you do want this to be kind of symmetrical. And so now if you played it, there we go. So now it really feels like, right? And then it stops at the end. Cool. And so now I've got this as an animated thing. I'm going to stop keyframing, come back here, come back here. Where did I put this? Here. Put these in the materials. There we go. Game. I need to make it a what? Prefab, exactly. Right, so I go to prefabs and I just drag my wrecking ball down there. And it's going to be an original prefab. Cool. And so now, actually let's do one more thing. It'd be good because we're going to want to have multiple wrecking balls, but we don't want them all to animate exactly the same, right? You don't want them all like, exactly, the animation speed script, right? That script is so useful. It allows us to animate once, but then get a lot of variety out of it. right? And so didn't I already put this in the, I didn't. Let's grab it off of our thing. Over here, modules, right? So again, many of the scripts can be used in all projects. So, am I in the right class? Yeah. Here we go. Let's grab the animation speed script. It's already in my downloads folder. That's right. So let's come in here. And we'll bring this in. There we go. It's recompiling. Give it a second. There it is. Right. So up here on the, it has to be where the animator is, right? Because that's what it's speaking to. And so we throw this on there, and we say that we want to have some variation. So I'll make it like 0.8 and 1.2, right? So that every time it has a little bit of variation there. And then I'll come back up to the top and say, yeah, override that. Apply to all. Cool. And so now, let's come into here. Because I didn't put the animation at the top, it allows me to easily, rotate this. Probably 90. There we go. So it's going side to side, like that. And yeah, you can just Control D this. And when these play in the game, we have wrecking balls that right? So this is we get this really advanced, cool obstacle because now, like, yeah, it's going to be much more difficult to time, right? Than if they all move together or something like that, right? And as it goes on, it sort of changes, right? So this is like a cool thing. And notice, again, right, the first name of the class, animation. I really took some time to come in here and really tune these keyframes, right, to make this feel like it had a sense of weight to it. Now, for these wrecking balls, where does the collider need to be? What's that? Yeah, just on the ball. We don't need colliders and all this other stuff. The character's not going to, like, we can't jump that high, right? We're not going to end up there. Like, maybe you need another one there, but let's come back to the hinge cylinder here. And so if we add the sphere collider, and we're going to need to tune that a little bit and probably dial down the radius. There we go. Right? And again, now that I made that change, crap, I have all these other wrecking balls. How do I have to make it on each one? No. I come back up to the top, overrides, and say, oh yeah, apply this to all of them. And so now every wrecking ball has a collider. Easy peasy. Super fun. Let's see if we can actually hit them. I wasn't really placing them anywhere. We'll move them closer to the character, just for testing purposes. Right, and so this is something where, like, now these have become, putting all four of these together has kind of like become like a meta obstacle, right? And array, like a bunch of them. And so now I can move them all as one thing. So wherever that would go. So here, right, it makes it easier to build this, again, modular design, right? We've got multiple versions of this thing. It's a little too low, but we get the idea. Yep, cool. We get smacked in the face by a wrecking ball. Success! Cool. Excellent. That's working well. So does the process make sense there? Cool. Okay, so we got a wrecking ball ray. We've got that. Oh, the ring. Yeah, so like a ring that spins or something like that. Let's see here. Let's try to bring in just a ring of some kind. Right, so what if there's a ring obstacle? I'm pretty sure I've seen this on Wipeout. Something like this. Up. And then maybe kind of like this. And this will face the other direction. And then maybe one more of these. Cool. Now we do want the edges beveled there, NB, so we can see the edges. Grab our bevel. I want to bevel both this one and this one, so I'll just grab all these three things and hit Alt-G to group them together. I don't think I grabbed the bevel. I grabbed shear for some reason. Bevel, there we are. Put that in there. Now the bevel is going to work. Let's go to our presets. There we go. And we see it works here and it works here. Why did it work on both? Because the purple ones, the deformers, work on their parent, which is what we were doing before, or peer. Peer meaning it's at the same level. But wait, if that's the case, why didn't Angelina's work that was at the peer level? Because it doesn't work as a peer if it's at the top level. Why? Because that means as soon as you added a deformer to the scene, it would immediately try to start deforming everything in the entire scene, which is just like not a great workflow. And so that gives us that there. And so now I've got this like support structure over here, which I could go to R for rotate and hold down Control as I rotate it and Shift and make one that is exactly offset. And then move it over here, right? And so now my obstacle is going to be this thing is going to be animated doing that, right? So cool, that gives us that support structure thing there. I'm going to take, this will be called support. We'll spell it correctly. This will be called support. Go. And we will grab one of those and say connect objects and delete, so that now it's just one mesh. This one, connect objects and delete, so it's just one mesh. This will be the obstacle ring. There we go. Sweet. We will now group all of this together. Alt-G, right? and this will be my ring obstacle. There we go. Excellent. You can copy and paste materials between projects. Come over here, Control V, show up. Okay, that's fine for now. Let's bring this in. So I'll come over here to export object. You have to select an object. There we go. FBX. This will be my ring obstacle. There we go. On the data drive. Great. Bring it in here. Cool. Can rotate this. This seems a little big for what I would want here. So go to the ring obstacle and go to model and then change my import scale factor, right? Let's make it about 1/3 as big, or 2/3 as big, 0.6. And say apply. There we go. That seems more appropriate. Now, where is this object over here? Ring obstacle, there we go. Cool. Okay, so now again, you could have it spin at a regular speed, but I think it might be more interesting if it was like spin, spin, maybe. So again, don't animate at the top, animate here. So we'll go to animation, and we will create some animation for that. This will be ring, spin, there we go. And we'll put it at 0. And keyframe. Set add a key. There we go. And we'll spin halfway. So we'll go to 180. And then we'll come back to 360. There we go. Now we want it to stay at this, right? Because now it's just going to sort of spin around. Let's go Alt right click to get some more time here. Open up the timeline a little bit. Grab this and expand this out, maybe about 5 seconds. Okay, and so we want it to stay in the middle. I'm going to Control C, Control V, and move these a little bit like this. And then also Control C, and then Control V here. So that spin, stop. Spin, stop. Right, rather than just spinning constantly. And again, let's do something more interesting with the curves. So our rotation here, which is this one, F, there we go. Again, you want those weighted curves. So let's come in and say both tangents weighted. And so this allows us to come in and really do some more aggressive easing. If you hold, is there anything to keep the overshoot? Nope. Cool. Right, so the overshoot I'm referring to is this. There's got to be a line for that, a shortcut. There really is not. Weird. Okay, so you have to be careful about this. right? So if I drag this out, but I angle it down a little bit, watch what happens now. It'll spin past and then come back, right? Now, in this instance, you know, that's not terrible. It kind of gives it more of a sense of weight in that, like, now it's stopping. But then, you know, it would spin again. If you'd want to have it do the same thing here, you'd have to go past and back. But if you didn't want it to do that, you have to make sure that the line is perfectly straight there, that you're not going to overshoot the keyframe and come back. Cool. All right, that's working. Turn this off. We got to get a collider on this. So the mesh collider. Did you try this one? So mesh should be what we want, right? Because there is no cat circle. Those are 2D polygon terrain. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I think we're gonna need the mesh collider. All right, so the mesh collider on this object. Should be seeing a. There you go. So when there is some sort of hole in it, this box is going to need to be checked. And you see it recalculates this. I don't know. Why are we not seeing it there? Let's test it. I think it might be on. We're just not seeing it. Mesh obstacle ring. That all looks good. Let's see. Okay, yeah, that is working. Cool. All right, I should be able to jump over it. Let's try. Wow, yeah, look at that. Some skills. If you didn't hear, I used skills with a Z when I said that. Cool. Look at that. That's pretty sick run. I think I'm ready for some esports. Cool, yeah, so the mesh collider is like the polygon collider in 2D, right? You should use sparingly, right? Because it is going to be more expensive than other colliders. And yeah, so that is pushing us out of the way, which is great. Cool. We got way more stuff going on here. Cool. All right, we're adding a lot to the game here. We've got these going on. All right, so my initial plans got kind of derailed here. We're at 4:30. Okay. Let's look at what people have going on here. Cool. All right, here's Cheska's. There you go. Cool. All right, you got the gist here of what's going on. You got your two colliders. I like what you did with the triangle at the beginning, as far as like a built-in way to let the player know where to go. And some other good things Cheska did here, the different heights, right? So sort of going up into this, and also segmenting out different portions of the game with sort of like gates, checkpoints that you could get through. And you got your two things going. This wrecking ball needs some work in terms of the animation, right? To feel a little bit more like it's this big, weighty thing. And you did get your robot in there. That all looks really good. Good first step on this game. Here's David's. Cool. So you put the material on the capsule? Did you just make a picture and wrap it on the, like drag it in?
Yeah, I was trying to just made a.
Just two eyes?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yep, that's, I mean, that's a good way so that we can see like what direction it's facing. Awesome. Cool. All right, so you got those things, and then you got the inflating things there. So did these work like you wanted?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah. I was thinking more like I wanted a artist animation that I wanted to make it seem more like a inflated.
Yeah. Yeah, so there, let's do it with a sphere. It's the, right back from the very first week of bouncing balls in ART 184, you want to have some of that wobble in there, but the wobble is going to happen on all of the scale parameters, right? So if it's this here, kind of like this, and let's make an empty parent. There we go. And then we'll animate this. This will be inflating object. Let's animate it. Cool. All right, so we want to keyframe, and we're going to animate backwards a little bit. Right, so we know we want to get to this inflation here, so I'm going to right-click. I'm going to move the playhead forward, right-click, and say Add Key, and then we want it to inflate up here, and so we want to start at, maybe not 0, but smaller number, like 0.2, 0.2, 0.2. Let's see. There. Also, what did you do? Did you add an anchor point to it, or? At the bottom, yeah. Okay, that's probably the best way to go. I'll show you a hack here that we could use to get around that. If I go back to this, I'm going to take the object and create another empty parent here, and take the object out of the hierarchy and do the same thing conceptually. So, like I said, you can't change the anchor point, but you could make a separate parent object, put the inflating object back in here, and then animate this, because it's going to then scale from this point. So we'll do that. This is inflation point. But the better play is what David did correctly. Instead of, you're like, oh, well, there's spheres in Unity. But if you make the sphere in Cinema 4D, then you can tell where the anchor point should be. So that would be the better play. But this is a workaround in this case where you can make another object, a blank object that you use as the anchor point. And so let's do this. There we go. And so now we can scale. And when we scale down here, it should shrink down, which is what we want. Cool. And so now we scale up, and now we want to do the thing where it wobbles a little bit, right? And so, and we need to go past this. Can we do it here? Can I control drag these? Can I control click? Yeah, I can control click. Control click to make a new keyframe. And so here, I'm making a wave. too much, too fast. Actually, it's only happening on one of the values. Oh yeah, this is not a great way to do it, because it's not gonna, the Unity keyframer is not quite as fully featured as the Cinema 4D one. So here, we'll have it come up to, we gotta go past. And so we'll make our max value here at the beginning 1.2, tab 1.2, tab 1.2. There we go. And then we'll move forward and we'll go the other way. 0.8, 0.8, 0.8. There we go. Right, so it goes, woo, maybe too much. We'll say it's 1.1, 1.1, and then 1.1. And then here, this is 0.9, 0.9, 0.9. There we go. See what I'm doing here? You know, like add and subtract on the same side. And then come forward to here, and this will now be 1.05, 1.05, tab 1.05. There we go. And then back to 0.95, 0.95, 0.95, just getting closer and closer to 1. And then maybe back to 1, 1, 1. There we go. And so now we want it to stay at 1 too. So I'll put another keyframe here at 1. So let's look at that. Cool, not bad. So now we can come into here where it's a little bit easier to adjust the timing on this, right? So it does seem a little quick. And so, for instance, if this one came a little bit this way and then we grabbed all of them, this is nice for expanding it, right? It keeps the same keyframes, but makes it a little bit more proportional. There we go, right? And so now, you know, it's like it does slow down at the end, right? So probably these, start to space these out a little bit more towards the end here. Cool. And then we're just going to do the same stuff in principle that we've been doing. We want it to stay there for a little bit, and so I'll go ahead and take this keyframe here and maybe move it over, and then at some point it shrinks back down. So that's the beginning keyframe here to the end there, right? And so now, and it would shrink back down. If you wanted it to stay shrunken down, you just grab this one and Control C, Control V. Right, so that gives you more what you're talking about, right? Yeah. Right, so again, the key, again, first word in the name of the class, animation and interactivity, right? Coming in here, anytime you're making something move, really thinking about the keyframes. And so we get that wave happening there. Cool. That animation is happening there. And now we're going to turn this into inflatable obstacle. There we go. Excellent. Now here we can, you know, maybe there's like a base to this of some kind. And the other thing, we know this now, we're almost always going to be duplicating these obstacles. And so they all of them are going to want the animation speed script, right? So that we can have them, you know, not being all the same. And so this one's in here. Again, we'll say it like 0.8 and maybe 1.2, right? And so now, same thing, let's add some materials to this. And so now we would prefab this thing, and we could make a bunch of these. And they would animate differently. Right, so the animation speed script, doing so much for us here. We pay a lot of attention to the animation when we make it, but then we use that animation speed script in order to be able to get a lot of cool variety just out of the box, right? By doing that, by making it procedurally change. Let's see if we're hitting those things. Yeah, cool. Probably need to be a little bit bigger, but that'd be easy. You can come into the top level of the inflatable obstacle. And since, again, there's no keyframes here on this, you could just scale the whole thing. Right, so where'd it go? Level's getting a little crowded here, layout-wise. Making sense? Cool. All right, so we got a lot of other good examples there from Fall Guys. And we've got a lot of stuff going on here. Let's see. We don't have too much time to get into it. We want to do some more materials and some more modeling on Wednesday. We talked about the, let's get weird, look at this strange thing here. There we go. Let's do one more modeling thing. Tubes. So if we wanted to make tubes, right, like slides or tubes, we're going to need to use splines. We're going to need to use a different view here. So I can go to the right-hand view. I'm going to come into the sketch, and I'm going to draw like a slide. Like that. That's not very smooth, so I'll come in here and turn up the smoothing and make it smoother. Kind of like that. Okay? Now, how could I turn this into a slide? With the object called the sweep. The sweep, if you look at it very closely, takes one spline and traces it along another spline, right? And so we need two splines. We need the sweep object, obviously, but then we need another spline. I'm just going to use a circle to demonstrate. I'm going to take the circle and make it smaller, kind of about like that. And now I'm going to put both of them as a child of the sweep. So the spline and the circle, and boom, I get a tube, okay? The order, they both need to be a child of the sweep, and the order matters. Okay, if I were to switch this, it's tracing the path along the circle, which is not what we want in this case. We want the other one, like this, right? So we have that. Okay, so that's not bad, but let's look here for our purposes. The circle may not be what we want. I think we're going to have the most success with the arc. I'm going to take the arc scale it down a little bit. I'm going to take the arc and make it a child of the sweep. There we go. Okay, so now you see what I got. It's cut more like a quarter of a slide, right? If you select the arc, there's some interesting parameters here. First of all, we want it to have some thickness. So I'm going to switch from arc to ring. There we go. Ring gives me an inner and an outer side, and then a start angle and an end angle, which allows me to dial in what I would want to do for this slide part. Now, a few things here. You see how this works pretty well, right? So again, I use the arc, and I switched it to ring, right? And then it gives me, like an inner radius and an outer radius to sort of dial in this shape. This shape is doing pretty well, but it is a lot of polygons, right? It does look like there's a lot of lines compared to some of our other things. So how can we manage this? We can manage this with the spline is going to control the geometry here. So the arc, I'm going to come in here to the points and turn down the number of points. Let's make it, just 2, right? By default, it's 8, which is just too many. And so I'm going to put it at 2. You see that drastically decreases the amount of polygons that go around our sweep without, it still looks fine, I think. And what's the problem with this edge? Not rounded. Exactly. So we need our bevel friend, and I'm going to take the sweep in the bevel and press Alt-G. Boom. Bevels that edge. Come in, dial up my bevel preset that I did earlier. Okay. A bunch of junk happened here. I think the offset may be too big. Try dialing down the offset. Yes, there we go. Right. So that's probably, I'm not really emphasizing making all this quote unquote to scale. There's enough going on. So, so we got that. Good. So now we got a cool slide here, right? Where this could be something that works pretty well in the game. And it's got our shape. This spline here, this is the path of it, and this is the, what's the word I'm looking for? This is the profile of it, right? And so you could easily make changes here to this if you wanted. This might be one where it makes sense maybe not to use the sketch, but to use the click and hold for the spline pen. So click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, click, right? And so that, if I dump that into the system, boom, I get that one. You can see that, some of the sharper corners are kind of problematic here, and so you may need to smooth those out a bit, selecting this spline, going into here, and perhaps adjusting. This is, so when you go to adjust spline points in Cinema 4D, you got to switch to E, the move tool, okay? It's kind of crazy. If you're in the select tool and you select a point in point mode, it'll show you the Bezier handles, but you can't click on them. It's just bad design. And so E for the move tool allows you to grab these, and now we're getting the sense of it. This, not great, right? You got it like running into each other. Smooth it out a little bit, right? Like so. And maybe the same thing over here, right? So grabbing this spline point. Again, I'm in point mode. There we go. And so now, this is the other spline tool, Lola, that I was referring to at the beginning. The other thing about the sweep that is super useful here is that we do have end scale, which would allow you to essentially taper the sweep. If I turn this down, you see the sweep gets smaller, right? If I wanted the top end bigger, I'd have to go into the arc and make it bigger, right? Like so. And you can see if you adjust these things, it changes the way that the relative scale of everything else that needs to be adjusted there. Right, but even as I make all these adjustments, the bevel is still working and rounding the corners. This is where Cinema 4D really shines. All of these things are essentially calculating live to allow you to do this stuff. And so this will be slide, and you guessed it, come in here and let's export this as an FBX. And we can bring that in. All right, so we've covered a lot of shapes here tonight, and a lot of animations. We're going to make probably 4 more obstacles, animated obstacles for the course this week. And so you don't have to make the exact same ones I did. What I want to see is maybe 1 or 2 of those, and then you guys thinking of your own things, like creating your own obstacles using these techniques. We'll go over some more material stuff on Wednesday, and we'll start adding a few other things on Wednesday to sort of get the look and feel of what's going on. But yeah, to get a different look and feel, maybe give it some texture. Right, so a lot of like really interesting animation happening with everything running together. The animation speed script really doing a lot of cool things for us. So between now and Wednesday, become an obstacle designer. Think about some other cool things you could do. If you have played the game, if you haven't, check it out. It's free. If you have anything, like you could even just run it on Steam on your computer. But if you have PlayStation or Xbox, it's on both those. Yeah, we'll talk some more about material stuff on Wednesday to bring some things together. Sound good? Awesome, cool, good work. We want to try and get this rolling here on the Tuesday after spring break. This semester, we now have a video game category for the Artists of Promise district-wide competition. And so we're trying to turn these into something that we might be able to enter in that competition. The deadline is going to be the Tuesday after spring break. So that gives us about 3 weeks here to work on stuff, turn this into a more fully featured, interesting game. And yeah, you may look at the Fall Guy stuff. We're using this as a jumping off point. Think about how you could put your own stamp, your own flair on this, right? Within this kind of visual language, Kai was doing a very good job of that. You saw, where was his? Why wasn't? They're just not. Oh, we looked at David's and I got sidetracked. Let's do that real quick. Abby's. Awesome. You got the fence and that one. You want to put one more obstacle in there. And those are probably animating too fast, for like the speed of the game. But you got the basic gist going. Nolan's. Cool, you got the robot out there. Robot legs are gone, but I guess it's just one of those legless robots now. Cool, yep. So Nolan did another thing there, right? You can use dynamic objects as like things that you could push around. and then he's racing towards Mickey Mouse, or sorry, copyright, Manny Mouse. And then Stephanie. Nice work, Stephanie. Cool fence design. And you've got your mushroom there. You've got those happening. And you got your tube. All right, good. You're well on your way there, Stephanie. That's looking like a full-on thing. Kai did some of what I'm talking about here. He took this idea and turned it into more of a Christmas theme, right? Where it's not kind of using the same visual language, but turned it into something that's going to be, a little bit more his own, right? So think about what you could do to sort of add your own layer on top of this. Awesome. You got a cookie smashing the other half the cookie there. Awesome. And then this is marshmallows. Cool. Christmas run. That's really good. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. And Kai's definitely on the right start there. She's got her sign, Janelle. Very good. And you got your obstacle course. And you got the moving walls. That's another one. There you go. Got to get around the robot. Cool. Nice. Okay. Awesome. If you're not to that point right now, you're going to want to add that. And yeah. Yeah, just like Kai did there, thinking about like what like it's Fall Guys, but what kind of twist could I give it, right? Food is going to be probably pretty good here, right? This idea of like Christmas food, like Kai did. Like crazy looking fruit certainly seems like something that might work. Think about that, how you could take it beyond. We sort of use that as a jumping off point. So let that mull around your brain between now and Wednesday. Sound good? All right, cool. Let me save this. See ya.